Today, I'll run through the Google AI overview. What it is, what's it mean for SEO, what does the future outlook for SEO look like, and I'll also go through why I'm quietly optimistic about this update. A bit of self-promo for Session Media. We're a B2B performance marketing agency and have helped hundreds of clients from all over the globe generate millions in pipeline from SEO, Google Ads, and LinkedIn. You can see a glimpse into what we've done to achieve that over the years in the case study section on our website. If you're a B2B business and keen to have similar successes, then send a message via the contact form on the site or drop me a DM on Twitter. Okay, let's get into it. So the Google AI overview. What happens now exactly? And I think it's fair to say we've seen a lot of panic. We've seen a lot of tears and a lot of we don't really know what to do. So what is the Google AI overview? So the Google AI overview is essentially a generative AI snippet that Google provides in response to a search query that's put into Google search, right? So in some cases now, instead of getting a Google ad right at the top or a featured snippet or whatever, now we're actually getting served an AI output in response to the keyword. So what I've done is I've just come into how Google have defined it, and I think there's a couple of interesting points here before we move forward. So it says that Google will provide an AI overview when you want to quickly understand information from a range of sources. So again, it sort of nods to if you're not looking to necessarily buy something there and then, or you're not looking for a direct solution, but you're just looking for information from a range of sources, that's when they'll serve an AI overview. So firstly, I think that's quite interesting. The second part that I also found quite interesting in this sort of brief documentation here is that the AI overview shows links to resources that support the information in the snapshot. So there was a lot of fear mongering going on when this was being tested. And we saw a small sort of sample of examples of how this could look. And quite often it was a long text snippet that would go way below the fold. And there was no sort of links to sources, or the links to sources will be almost put as like a footnote or a citation that didn't look that clickable. And I think it worried a lot of publishers into what would happen to their click-through rate and various other things. So I think those two things are firstly quite interesting, right? It's there to provide a range of information from a variety of sources, and they're also there to show you where they've got that information from as well. So off the back of that, and again, you need to determine yourself how much trust you put into Google with this. Always a big caveat with that, right? Should you panic? Should you cry? Should you do both? I'm actually in the camp of none of the above. Let's chill out. And I'm going to run through some examples as to why I think that is the case as well. So what's been the reaction so far? Well, we saw a tweet from Sean at Rank Theory that actually showed a nice little uptick in searches for turn off Google AI. Now, again, a bit of an anecdotal sample size and probably just a nod to more the humorous element of the direct reaction to this. But, you know, I don't think you can totally discontinue as to what the general sort of Google search community are thinking about the AI overview and its helpfulness so far. So fair to say, maybe not the best response that Google were possibly imagining. But of course, again, you go back to the whole old Henry Ford analogy. If you'd asked people what they wanted back in the day, they'd have said faster horses. He obviously pioneered the first car, right? So when you have a huge and significant change to, I guess, a piece of technology that users have become used to for so many years, it's always going to be met with a bit of an indifferent reaction when that thing suddenly changes. I think that's normal. So reaction so far, well, you know, maybe not the best, but let's see what happens. I'm going to run through a few sort of current tests as well and actually give a bit of insight into why I don't think it's going to be that bad. Again, I will caveat that this sort of depends on your business, your website as well, and actually how you monetize that site as well. We are predominantly B2B. We do a lot of B2B local SEO as well. So I'm looking at this from the point of view from those broad industries first and foremost. So let's have a look at some examples. So this change here, what is a Kanban board previously? So we just had one result above people also ask. We then had JH Shirk, if I pronounce that correctly, probably, who gave us a run through of what this now looks like in AI overview. So actually, what's the major difference here when we take a look at both? So let's get the pen out. So we still got our result down here, and this is going to be way above the fold as well. We've essentially got here what looks like a featured snippet. You know, if you had covered the bottom bit down here, you'd have immediately said that this looks like a featured snippet. But what I find really fascinating, and again, owing to, or going back to what Google stated would be the output of the AI overview, is that you have 3 links here, right? And you've actually got the same domain, Atlassian, appearing not once, but twice. So from an Atlassian point of view, they would look at this and say, well, the user likelihood of clicking, okay, it might not be as high as it would be up here, but I don't think the CTR from this to this will significantly change that much. Now, again, this does depend on the intent of that searcher, right? If they're just looking for a one-liner to put in a report or something, then yes, obviously the likeliness is that CTR will drop. But I will argue that with the rollout featured snippets some years back, the estimation, the hypothesis was that CTR would drop, but actually it increased because there was more real estate for that one individual link above the fold. And I actually think something similar would happen here. Now, the benefit to Kanban tool here is that instead of being below the fold as they are on this result here, they are now actually served alongside ranking position 1 at Atlassian. So actually the likeliness of a user clicking on this result here has probably increased maybe at least 4 or 5x. If we're looking at a broad sort of estimation of, say, depending on the niche, I don't know, 20-30% click on position 1, and then that incrementally drops to maybe 13%, 10%, 4%, 2%, something. I would say that between these two results here, the likeliness of a user clicking 1 and 2 is probably going to be around that sort of 20-30%, right? So actually, I think the top 2 results may actually gain out of this, and you can't necessarily also discontinue the top 3 results in that as well. So I think that's the first point here. It's really, really interesting that there's an increased chance to appear above the fold alongside maybe the 2 URLs that were previously above you, and therefore the likeliness of a user to click on your URL, should you be in that top 3, probably increases. Let's have a look at some others. So here, is SEO dead? This was previously a snippet. When I searched this, I had LinkedIn as the only clickable link above the fold. Our friends over at Semantic SEO have run this through the AI overview, and this is the result that they get. So we can see that it's a slightly longer box here than the one above with the Kanban board. And I think this is largely due to the broad nature of the query, right? Is SEO dead? There's a lot of different viewpoints, explanations, different sort of thoughts and opinions on this, and therefore there's a larger overview that's being provided. So not only have we got the equivalent of the snippet, we've got some bullet points here, but again, we've got our 3, or maybe we be fair and say 2.5 links alongside each other, which again says to me that the chances to gain that click, if you're in position 2, exponentially increases to probably something similar to ranking in that first position, so to speak, as well. So again, 2.5 sort of opportunities here, I think it's fair to say. Now, I'm not going to dive into the quality of the output at the moment because I know that that will always encourage scrutiny, right? I'm purely looking at likeliness of the user clicking based on the size of the overview that sits above the fold. Let's have a look at some others. So this was taken, I think, either Google's example themselves, or I found this across the site somewhere. Explain the connection between lightning and thunder. Previously featured snippet, one ranking URL within the feature snippet, and then people also ask as well. The AI overview here is giving us 3 options, actually. So we've got an original with a step-by-step actually answering the user query in a little bit more depth, which you have to say is good for user experience. But they've also got 2 other options here, and they've only got 2 clickable links as well. So if we go over to the breakdown, this is where Google actually provides a longer, more in-depth breakdown of the connection between Lightning and Thunder. So again, you've got sort of more user choice, which could technically reduce the opportunity for the user to click on one of these 2 links here, because there's a higher likeliness that they'll click on either the second or third option to gain or gather the information that they're looking for. So it does appear that based on the query will determine essentially like the AI overview quote unquote markup that will be presented to you in the SERP as well. Now, obviously, big caveat here, these are all sort of info queries. They're all queries that are essentially asking a question, and you would expect that it would be probably easier for Google to just provide a straight answer or a step-by-step breakdown into fully explaining that answer, right? So at the moment, these sort of queries may hit publishers that were ranking either bottom of page 1 and were largely monetized from ad revenue and relied on driving traffic from queries such as this. Let's take a look at a few more further down. So this one was actually cited quite recently by Levels.io on Twitter. So he obviously runs nomadlist.com, which is the domain ranking top at the moment for best cities for digital nomads, and actually it's done very well to still be above the likes of Reddit Forum, who are brute forcing their way to the top. Thanks, Google. In the world of Google's AI overview, what we've got here, again, sort of an attempt at providing some answers. Now, the one thing I will say here is, again, the query is so ambiguous that the AI overview can give so many different types of answer to this query and probably still not get it right because the user hasn't qualified the query enough. We don't know if they're looking for economic factors, safety factors, government legislation, cleanliness, accessibility. There's so many different factors that can go into this query that this is always going to be a little bit nuanced, I think, per each searcher. So what have we got? We've still got an attempt to answer the query. So it's given us 4 different options here. Again, it hasn't actually given much of a reason as to why in the first and third one, sorry. But this one here, they've actually said monthly cost of living is this and quick internet speed. So again, it's made an attempt to assume what the user is looking for when they're searching for best cities for digital nomads, right? Again, making assumptions there, so these may not necessarily be correct. Same with number 4 as well, budget-friendly, affordable Uber rides. And then we still got our 3 links down here, or 2.5 links. But interestingly, we don't have the Nomad list that is at the moment ranking number 1 for the traditional search in the traditional SERP. So that's certainly one to watch. And it does look like at the top here, we've got a Reddit forum, and we've got another domain here that I don't necessarily recognize right now. As we scroll down, it's given other cities, it's given regions. But I think in summary, what it's tried to answer the query assuming a couple of variables that we haven't defined, and then it's trying to point us to a forum. And I think, again, if we've got quite an ambiguous query such as this, it's not necessarily going to know what we're looking for. And so I think as a user, we're going to be more likely to click on a link here or continue scrolling down until we find a link that actually addresses a variable that we had in mind, such as cost, cleanliness, safety, for example. But I think typically a user will either click at the top here, scroll down to the more sort of traditional SERP, or they'll requalify their keyword to be a little bit more in line with the specific variables they're looking for when they class what a best city is, for example. So let's have a look at a quick sort of summary of what we've seen in these early examples. So generative AI, or the AI overview, how I see it at the moment for these sort of queries is an extension of the featured snippet. It might even just be like the featured snippet, and then we have 3 links that sit alongside each other instead of on top of each other. I do think that there's, again, more opportunities to click positions 1 to 3 or 1 to 2.5, however you want to qualify it. But the negative will be that actually there will be fewer opportunities to click from position 4 downwards, which makes the real estate above the fold even more valuable. So looking at that, am I bearish or bullish with generative AI? So let's start on the left-hand side. Where am I quite bearish with this? So I think recipe sites, if you're a food publisher, you publish recipes, I think generative AI will try and produce those recipes in the AI overview, and subsequently I do think that there'll be a significant drop in a number of clicks to sites that exclusively publish recipes. Second part, informational sites, travel sites. We had a small or just a single example previously. I think Google will attempt to become a bit of a travel guide for the user in the AI overview. And therefore, I think clicks to travel sites offering sort of travel routes, or as we've seen with the query above, best cities for X. Also think quite a few programmatic SEO sites could take a bit of a hit with this. So a site that auto generates tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pages based on very simple queries. The one I put in here, calculate 2 times 3. AI overview will just attempt to answer this query and therefore save you from having to click the top result and find out what that query. So I think a lot of programmatic SEO sites will see a bit of a hit, and niche sites as well. I think if you're still only monetizing via Google for a niche site, i.e. a site that is tied to one specific category with the sole purpose of passing the user onto an affiliate site such as Amazon, for example, the lifeline of these is getting shorter and shorter, and the AI overview will essentially aim to provide the information that user may be searching for. For example, if you search best weed killer, I would expect the AI overview to give a list of the best weed killers, for example, and then link out to the actual sort of site where you can buy that said product directly, instead of pointing you or them to the niche site to read a little bit more. Again, this will be industry specific and it will be query specific as well. And also think that doubling down on brand signals and EE80 will be absolutely fundamental whilst going through this process as well. So some negatives to the AI overview panel in itself. It has had quite a lot of scrutiny. It's quite obviously ripping content off of sites for its learning. So it's essentially taking content from publishers, kicking that publisher from page 1 off of Google, but still serving their content. Point 2, quality of output as well. AI still isn't perfect. We've seen that. It's quite feasible that actually the answers we get from the AI won't necessarily be correct. And they've got to be really careful here with the YML industry from in this perspective as well. So there's every chance again that the YMYL might be the last to get hit by this, as Google chooses to link off to reputable sites that they trust to serve that user query on their own real estate, basically. It's uncertain how it's going to meet variant intents as well. So what I've shown is largely informational queries, best X for Y sort of queries. You don't really know what's going to happen with e-commerce, though the nature of an e-commerce query suggests that they will have to serve an e-commerce vendor to fulfill that query, right? And then also people also ask, right? You probably noticed throughout all of these examples that the people also ask box pretty much had been retired. So what happens with that? We'll see. So where am I bullish for this? Well, local business, local SEO. I think if you're looking for a plumber in Richmond, you want to be pointed to a plumber based in Richmond. And I don't think that there's going to be an obvious way for Google to fulfill the user intent by just explaining or listing out the best plumbers in Richmond without linking out to them. So I think local business, local SEO should, in theory, be the last to sort of get impacted by this, or maybe not even impacted at all. Lead generation businesses as well, so consultancies. Again, if you've got a solution-based query, you want to find that consultant to fulfill the intent, you need to be served that user's website, right? Quite simply. B2B as well, same as the above. If you're looking for an agency, a keyword plus agency, keyword plus business, keyword plus service, for example, to fulfill that intent, Google will need to provide the listing for that user. And there's also the possibility that if Google does roll out an AI overview for queries that fall in this bracket, that the user will not have their intent fulfilled. They will scroll past it until they find a site that is ranking underneath it, right? As well, the user still has freedom of choice when it's presented with this information. Last two here. So e-commerce, as mentioned, if a user is searching for black Nike shoes, for example, they want to be served a vendor where they can go and buy that. I think that's quite obvious. And sort of gaming as well. If you're looking to play solitaire, if you're looking to play Texas Hold'em, something like that, you want to be served with a site in which you can play those games. So I think AI overview will either not impact or will be the last to impact all of these different industries here. And I actually think there's going to be a whole bucket more that will come out not having been impacted. And it'd be interesting to see what happens with those as well. I've briefly been through some of the opportunities here, but I think some of the positives that have come out of this, we saw in the first example that there's an opportunity to potentially appear twice above the fold, which is really good. So within the AI overview and then straight underneath that as well, depending on the user query. There's a greater share of clicks that will go between 1 and 3. So now instead of just aiming for that number 1 position to maybe hoover up 20-30% of the clicks, if you're in the top sort of 3 or 2.5, that sort of 30% I think will be a little bit more evenly spread between those URLs. And again, I think search remains intent driven. So if a user is looking for a specific solution, they go to Google. Google will need to serve that URL as the solution to fulfill user intent, right? And even if that means them scrolling down the AI overview or disabling it somehow, they will navigate their way to that website. For those of you that use Systrix, Alida Solis over on Twitter has actually identified that Systrix has already started including the AI box as a SERP feature for keywords. So plug in Amazon.com. The example she's put here is Animal Farm. We can see that there's an AI box getting served for that keyword. So if you want an early look at which types of queries this is impacting, jump into Systrix, plug in some domains, have a look at some of the keywords, and you may be surprised by some of those results as well. So most importantly, what to do now. SEO has changed so much over the years, but by the same margin, it hasn't changed that much. And our recommendation is always to build more links. So thank you for listening. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you want more sort of content like this, please let me know. Any feedback in the comment box is really appreciated. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next video.